Hey, Laura. And I see Cheryl. Oh, man. What a tiring day I've had. I don't know about y'all. It's kind of overcast here in San Diego, which is kind of nice because it's always sunny in San Diego. But um, just a long, long day. I didn't really sleep well last night, so I'm a little tired today. I apologize for that. Um, just too much going on. And it gets a little tiring after a while. Hello, Winterish for Ukraine, Slava Ukraine. It's good to see you all coming in. We'll give it a few minutes and let people get in here and let it get to the top of the hour. Hopefully, the algorithm will start recording in a timely manner. Good evening, Greg. Nice to see you. I see that a lot more people who came in the legal way are now being deported. So that's what I and other immigration, I don't know, experts or people knowledgeable about this warned everybody of. It's funny, somebody this afternoon liked one of my posts, one of my notes from like a year ago in January 2025. I said, you can't have a mass deportation without sexual abuse, death, violence, all of this. Uh, Family separation and child abuse and all this, and especially death. And when I at the time I said I'll post this every day, but then I got really kind of tired of posting it, to be honest with you. I'm sorry, my dogs are outside my window barking, little shits. And hi, Arlene. And but they liked it, so it came back around, and so I circled the date. I was like, check mark, exactly what it said was gonna happen, and it's not anything like, I knew from the inside. I've just read about the, mass deportation from 1954 that was called, forgive my language, it was called Operation Wetback, and, um, and that was the same thing as is going on right now, and I remember in the beginning of this, Tom Homan had said he was on 60 Minutes, and they asked him about Operation Wetback, and he goes, "Oh, I don't know anything about it." And I'm like, "You're supposed to be the expert in this. How could you not know it? You don't even know your own immigration history." Hey, Evie. And because he just didn't want to talk about how brutal and disgusting it was. And they deported quite a bit of American citizens just simply because they were Mexican Americans, and so we'll see a lot of that as well too. We're seeing it mostly right now with children, and then with people who got their citizenship recently and stuff. But they've always kind of done that. They tend to, hi, Anna Marie. Um, they also tend to deport our veterans. So, a lot of people, and I didn't know this when I first started the Border Patrol. They didn't teach us this. I found this out the hard way on a bus inspection. And there were some soldiers on there, and they gave me their green cards, and I was like, "What?" And I had no idea. That's how bad the training is in the Border Patrol. And of course, they shamed me. Said, "You're a Border Patrol agent. You don't even know the law." And I'm like, "Yeah, no shit." So, but they deport a lot of them, a lot of deported veterans. There are groups in Tijuana, all over the world actually, of deported veterans, deported US veterans. And so that is problematic. During the Biden administration, they were repatriating a lot of them and bringing them back. But unfortunately, of course, we've gone backwards and so forth. So people from other countries can volunteer to serve in our military, and that helps speed up their ability to get their status. But then at the same time, what it does for us, even though I don't agree with a lot of the military things we do, or a lot of the bombing and all that stuff, it allows us to then have people who speak languages fluently and understand the cultures that we're going into and stuff. It's amazing watching the military just absolutely shoot themselves in the foot by getting rid of anybody who's not, white American, mostly white American, and getting rid of people who speak Farsi, Arabic, Chinese, all sorts of languages, and so forth. But that's what this this administration is about. They're the opposite of what they say they are. And when they say we want to make America great again, all they're doing is trashing America. But at the same time, it's kind of like I'm kind of happy that people are seeing the truth now. And a lot of people who maybe were center left are starting to realize, there's a lot more going on. It's not just Republicans and stuff. So, um, but yeah, Evie saying, didn't she just see that a veteran's pregnant fiance was just deported for overstaying her visa? Yeah. So, I mean, the answer to this administration's every single immigration violation, and they're violations. They're all immigration. Immigration law is civil law, so it's a violation. It's not a criminal law. Um, every single one of the answers that this administration has is deportation. What, you overstayed your visa? Deportation. You couldn't afford to re-up your worker's permit? Deportation. And that's just, that's like saying for every single crime, we're going to give you life in prison. It's just not realistic. I mean, for this administration, it's about racism and white nationalism. Obviously, we can see that through Stephen Miller. Um, and then for a lot of people, obviously, it's also about Christian nationalism. And so everybody has their different, reasons why they're doing it. I think Donald Trump, for him personally, I think he's just going in it for the money. It's a smash and grab. That's what they're doing. And I also think it's interesting to see, like, when people say, why do people come here from Central America, Africa, and places? And it's like, well, because we go there and we steal all their resources and we destroy their land and we pollute their environment. And then we support dictators in those countries who allow us to do that stuff. And then sometimes we bomb them. That creates refugees that end up coming here. So we create these situations on our own. But what we're seeing in the United States right now is we're seeing these same oligarchs, these same American billionaires who have done this in, like, Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador. I just did my Duolingo for today, so my accent's a little bit better. And the things that they have done in these other countries is what they are doing to us here in the United States. Um, and so, this is nothing new. I think Black Americans are just sitting back, nodding their heads, fully expecting all this. A lot of our Latinos, especially our indigenous people, are like, yeah. So it's pretty much, it's a clusterfuck. Yes, Nancy. That's a good way to put it. It's a clusterfuck. So I'm a little bit less agitated, a little bit more quiet. By the way, this is a Dead Milkman shirt. If you know the Dead Milkman. I listened to jazz more lately, but obviously a punk rocker from the 80s, so I love that kind of shit. Let's see, where are we at? We're at 5:05. So today, I think I promised you last time. I'm looking at a whiteboard when you see me do this. I have a list of things, just an immense list of things I want to write, talk about. Bitchin' Camaro, Jeff. That's right. I ran over my neighbor. That's a Dead Milkman reference. And I told you I would talk about Epstein and CBP. So let's do a little Epstein and CBP. Let's look at what that is about. Let me get my piece up here so I can follow along. But again, we'll do this and then I'll have questions. And probably won't put it up tonight because I'm so tired, but I'll probably have a glass of wine and a little bit of weed after this, but for my hands, of course, and enjoyment. I recommend you look at the written piece when it comes up for this recorded live that we're doing now, because there's this great freaking picture that I found in the Epstein files of Epstein's favorite CBP officer, Carol Montgomery, was a woman, is a woman. I don't know if she's still alive. I know she's retired, but I don't know if she's still alive. And the picture I'm going to use was found in the files, and Epstein is standing there with his arms kind of folded, leaning into Carol, and they're both kind of smiling a little bit in the camera. And right behind Carol is the U.S. Customs and Border Protection seal. And I think that picture kind of says it all. It just really, really, really says it all. So let's go ahead and get started with this. I entitled it CBP and Jeffrey Epstein. And do definitely go look at the written part of this. You'll see in here that I have links to articles or websites in here, just so I'm citing my sources. But then also I give when I'm referring to when my source is an Epstein file, I'm giving the number of that Epstein file. Okay, so I'm like freaking tired of looking through the Epstein files. Let me tell you. So I try and not do too much of the Epstein files, but there's obviously this connection with CBP, right? So we kind of have to address that. And I would say that there's been several articles in both large and small media outlets that it's addressed the connections between CBP and Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking network. And I don't want to spend too much time rehashing all those different pieces because there's so much in there. I wanted to try once again to bring my knowledge of the agency and the culture and give you an overall picture of how something like this can happen. And CBP is like, oh, we didn't know anything. So I kind of wanted to explain that and then have at the end, I'll give you a little bit different take that I've not seen anybody really talking about. So, but if you want to read about those pieces, you could just search for them either on any browser or any search engine, and you can find them pretty easily if you go CBP and Epstein, and those articles will come up. I believe The Guardian did it, and a lot of other people did it. But they really didn't talk that much about the one who I consider the most important. We're going to talk about her, CBP officer Carol Montgomery, in just a minute. So this, if you think about this trafficking, if we go back to he pled guilty to soliciting prostitution from a minor, which was, lowered compared to what he was actually should have been charged for. And so, because they gave him that really sweetheart deal and gave him that light sentence. And so you think that was back in 2008. Obviously, he was trafficking much longer than that. So we're talking about decades worth of trafficking. And literally there's testimony of like a plane load full of little girls. So, just the thought that something like this could happen and CBP not know about it, it's not possible. I'm just telling you right now to go through official airports and actually being inspected versus trying to be subversive about it. There ain't no way CBP didn't know about this. And this piece and other pieces have proven that they definitely had to know about it. But I kind of am trying to make more of the ties that they definitely knew about it instead of just suggesting it. And I think at the same time, CBP and even Congress, they just don't even seem to even care to investigate the failures or the intentional just looking the other way kind of stuff, which does need to be investigated. So it's a whole lot of information. I'm going to try and boil it down to just a very understandable synopsis of the situation. So how did CBP agents help help Epstein traffic children? It's important to point out that any relationship with criminals, especially someone known for sex crimes against children, is expressly forbidden in CBP and all the federal government agencies and law enforcement. Like if you start dating somebody and you find out that, number one, if they're undocumented, that's completely unforgivable. You will be charged for that. And it's supposed to be unforgivable and at least fireable offense for you to associate with sex traffickers. and giving favors such as light inspections or signing off on documents or even giving the impression of favorable treatment is a violation and grounds for dismissal, at the very least, within these immigration agencies. CBP officers asking wealthy travelers for money, loans, business advice, and crossing the line from professional into personal relations is literally corruption. It is literally corruption. So the U.S. Customs and Border Protection states on their website that all of their officers are highly trained to recognize human trafficking and sex trafficking. They are the sex trafficking experts, or so they claim. Yet not a single officer reported Epstein and his plane loads of little girls. All the officers in the files stated that they believed the girls were, they called them women, and they said that they seemed, quote, happy to be there. In the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell for her part of the sex trafficking organization, FBI agents interviewed several CBP officers who were working in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Epstein's pilot, Larry Visosky, stated in his FBI interview that Epstein routinely tried to create relationships with CBP officers, personal relationships outside of their roles at CBP when they were inspecting him. And that was done to ease the customs and immigration inspections with which he was bringing these little girls through. He even tried to buy the whole CBP office in the Virgin Islands computers because they said their computers were too slow, and a whole bunch of turkeys. I imagine that must have been around Thanksgiving or something. But a supervisor or higher had turned it down and said such gifts would be unethical and against policy, which it is. But just to be clear, CBP officers are trained to be leery of people trying to gain favors in this matter. And so if you're Border Patrol, ICE, FBI, anybody, you are supposed to be very leery of these people, and they specifically train you for that. So when these officers and agents pretend like, well, I didn't know, blah, 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 bullshit, bullshit. It doesn't say bullshit in the written piece, but it is bullshit. So at first, Visosky claimed that he was not aware of any gifts or preferential treatment given to Epstein by CBP officers. But then he later admitted in the interview that he had, in fact, given one or two helicopter rides to officers, that one CBP officer had a private lunch with Epstein on his island, and that another officer played the steel drums at a party at his mansion while off duty. I think those are all like little statements that you may have heard in the media. But Epstein's pilot further claimed that he and other staff were ordered to keep the phone numbers of these chosen CBP officers so that they could help facilitate their inspections upon arrival and departure. The inspections discussed in the FBI interviews all occurred after Epstein's guilty plea. And the officers interviewed admitted that they knew of his criminal record for this solicitation of prostitution of a minor. At the same time, Visosky stated that he was not aware of CBP's involvement with helping Epstein traffic children. But the definition of helping someone traffic children is never really fully explained by the FBI in these documents. And it seems that they are basically saying CBP did not actively help him traffic or hide that he was trafficking children. And they're not considering that the favors giving to these officers, which violates policy, like the free helicopter rides and the free meals or the financial advice or the lax inspections, they don't consider that as aiding and abetting Epstein in his sex trafficking. Yet, I just would like to make a comment is like, but yet if you so much as read a magazine, a zine that talks about ICE in a negative way, they consider that to be aiding and abetting. So it's just kind of interesting, you know. So that the officers knew that Epstein was a child sex trafficker was shown in an email exchange involving the FBI New York's Office Criminal Division, where they stated that CBP officers routinely called Epstein's plane the, quote, school bus, and referred to his private island as the, quote, pedophile island. And so that document right there, I give the Epstein document number if you want to go look it up. Yet not a single officer ever seemed to report, investigate, or question the plane loads of girls. And the FBI seems to think that none of this is criminal or even problematic. In fact, they give excuses for them in the interviews itself. It's just bizarre to see that. Because in these interviews, you're just supposed to state what they state, and you're just supposed to state the facts in your reports, but you see them pontificating that, well, maybe he was bragging about this, maybe he really didn't. This it's like he's got 3 phone numbers for Epstein in his phone, dude. Come on. So CBP officer Timothy Roush, Routch, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, so I'm going to say Roush, is an example of how Epstein maintained relationships with inspectors he considered to be friendly to him. Roush was interviewed by the FBI in the Maxwell case. He stated that he inspected Epstein's plane several times a month for several years. In the beginning of the interview, he claimed he never received any benefits or gifts from Epstein, nor did he give the predator any favors. But just like Visosky, he contradicted himself the more he talked. That's pretty common in a lot of these interviews. They'll come out with what they want the story to be, and then as you keep going, then they kind of, okay. So that's pretty common. But law enforcement officers should obviously be forthright and upfront, and they are not being so here. He admitted to hanging around Epstein's office when he was off duty and asked him if he could get him a better deal on a loan for some property he wished to purchase in the Virgin Islands. He eventually told the FBI investigators that he became friends with Epstein's pilot and his boat captain by drinking at a bar near Epstein's office. And he even visited the private island at least twice. That's what he admitted to. He then stated that he was taken to the island by this boat captain that he had befriended at a bar while not on duty to give Epstein an inspection of coconut trees, which is a favor. There he was treated to a free lunch with wine with Epstein, and they then traveled back on his boat, which means he did accept gifts. And they put in the report, it's interesting, they say, well, the sandwich and the wine was only about worth $25. It does not matter. It does not matter how much money it is. And the fact that you're going off duty to give him customs inspections of his trees is just bizarre. He did state that he noticed, quote, beautiful women playing in the ocean during lunch, but that they all seemed happy. His words were happy. Nobody was complaining. Nobody was crying, that kind of thing. So when investigators asked Roush what he thought of Epstein and his sex crimes, the CBP officer stated that he believed it was a setup and that he was framed, and claimed that he was, quote, a good guy. Even though the officer knew of his criminal record, he knew what it was for, he inspected plane loads of girls coming to the island, stated that he knew many were of, quote, Eastern European descent and poor, he still thought Epstein was, quote, a good guy, and never bothered to question anything. Roush even had an ex-girlfriend who filed a complaint with the FBI and claimed that he had bragged to her about being close with Epstein and facilitated the trafficking. But when questioned by his supervisor about this, Roush stated that the complainant had a history of mental illness and a prior suicide attempt, and therefore her testimony could not be trusted. And so the supervisor gave him a verbal admonishment and warned him to be careful about who he had relations with, while noting that Officer Roush had a history of, quote, international travel for personal rendezvous excursions. And I give the 2 Epstein file numbers here that you can find that in. Officer Roush then admitted to traveling extensively through Central America. Now, I don't know if he engaged in sexual tourism there, but it's important to note that Central America is a hotspot for sex tourism, prostitution, which is AKA a better way of saying personal rendezvous excursions. And within CBP and Border Patrol culture, this is very popular, as evidenced by the most recent chief of the Border Patrol, Michael Banks, being forced to retire for said activities in Central America. And by the murders of two CBP agents, Mathil Wasson and Jaime Eduardo Cisneros. And I give the link in here to the article about how they were killed when they were down in Colombia on personal rendezvous excursions. So it's quite common within the agency, within both CBP and the Border Patrol, for sexual tourism. And they actually sometimes go together as a group. So, but all those cases happen within the last 5 years. So it's very common. Rausch would have never met Epstein had he not been inspecting his plane in his official capacity as a CBP officer. And that's what makes this corruption. The line from inspecting CBP officer to then becoming personal relationship with benefits is clear in these files. Yet the FBI and CBP did not seem interested in investigating this possible corruption, and instead suggested Rausch was exaggerating his ties to Epstein to make himself seem more important. Okay, I guess exaggerating your ties to a sexual predator somehow makes you important in CBP? Okay. Rausch has since claimed that all of these statements from his supervisor and the FBI investigation are lies, even though it was an interview with him and his attorneys. All right. So, among all the CBP officers with close ties to Epstein and his sex trafficking organization discussed in the files, one seems to stand out more to me, and that is CBP officer Carol Montgomery. In January of 2010, Officer Montgomery sent Epstein and his pilot a New Year's Eve card wishing them both well and signed off as, quote, "A friend always, Carol." This suggests that she was associating with Epstein on a personal level within just a few years after his plea deal to soliciting prostitution from a minor in 2008. And on the written piece, I will have the actual little card that she sent to him. It says, Larry, which is the first name of his pilot, Larry and Jeff, my wish for you both in 2010. And it just goes into this diatribe. It's just ridiculous. May peace break into your home, and may thieves come and steal your debt. May the pockets of your jeans become a magnet for $500 bills. May love stick to your face like Vaseline, and may laughter assault your lips. Oh my God, it's just insane. May happiness slap you across the face. And it just goes on and on. And it says, may 2010 be the best year of your life. I can't wait to see you both. And then it says, a friend always, Carol. So that's back in 2010, January 2010. In January 2011, in her official capacity as CBP officer, Epstein's staff was told to bring, quote, the passports and the boat documents, unquote, that Epstein wanted to get registered with CBP, and she would take care of it for him. Officer Montgomery even gave directions and added, quote, he can call me if he gets lost, unquote. I've never had a CBP officer be so nice. In February 2011, she asked if Epstein would help her invest $10,000. In November of 2011, she sent Epstein an email telling him to have a happy Thanksgiving and wishing him well. She stated that she missed him. Okay. In January 2013, she emailed Epstein personally to she had his personal email. She wished him a happy birthday, writing, quote, And she writes kinda weird, so forgive me if I pause on this because she doesn't use she's like Epstein, she's really bad speller, really bad capitals, and doesn't use punctuation, so forgive me. But she says, quote, "The friendship we have had over the years brightens every corner of the world. Your birthday is a perfect change for me to chance," I think she meant chance, "a perfect chance for me to thank you, Jeffrey, for being a wonderful friend to me. Happy birthday. You are so special and never seem to ask for anything, but bring so much joy to others." Smiling emoji. Happy birthday, unquote. And then she signed it XOXO, just like a normal CBP officer who conducts inspections and gets documents certified for you. In February 2013, she emailed Epstein, quote, "I do miss you. How are you doing?" And then she goes on about, and I don't want to read it. It's ridiculous about how she's going on a trip. She's going on a cruise to Copenhagen, and she's telling him where she's going to be. And then she's going to fly into Iceland and then back to Seattle because at that time she had left the Virgin Islands. So she leaves the Virgin Islands as an inspector of Epstein and ends up going to Washington State, but still maintains this relationship. So in 2013, she's in Washington State. And that's when she added the photo of herself in her official capacity as a CBP officer standing with Jeffrey Epstein as an adjudicated sexual predator right in front of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection seal. In September 2013, then CBP officer Cale Montgomery was in Washington State and desperate to meet up with her buddy, Jeffrey Epstein. The FBI redacted much of this conversation, which leads one to believe she is possibly referencing the sexual trafficking, or at the least possibly mentioning her involvement in helping him get around CBP regulations. And I will attach that document in a PDF on there to let you see it and give the link as well. In February of 2015, she wrote, quote, "Hi, Jeffrey. Now I realize why you were not able to come up at the end of January, so that you and I could celebrate our January birthdays together." Oh, they're so close. "I just wish that the news media would get over themselves and quit hashing over the same old stuff. What they think is new news was cleared up over 3 years ago." So she's talking about his sexual abuse of children. "It's just unbelievable that the news media can't find something different to sell their magazines and newspapers. I so much hope things are going to be better for you in this year. Always know you mean a lot to me, and I have 100% faith that you will be found innocent again. Anything that I can do, please don't hesitate to call me, text me, write, or even have Larry fly you up, just so maybe you can get some quiet time for yourself." So she's inviting him to come and stay with her. And she is still a CBP officer in 2015, in the beginning of 2015. She ends up retiring, though, in 2015 eventually. Then she finishes the note to him. She says, "Please know," and she spells no, N-O, just going to say, "please know you have a friend forever," unquote. In September 2015, she sent an email that the FBI entirely redacted, save for her addressing it to Epstein. And I give the link here. I give the Epstein file number here. It's just the whole thing's black, except it says from Carol Montgomery to Jeffrey Epstein. And that's it. Everything else is black. And you're like, what the hell is in there? It's just like, I got to know, right? I don't know that we'll ever know. But so in December of 2015, she is retired. And she sends Jeffrey an email requesting and telling him that she would like to work for him and be hired by him. Okay. In February 2016, she is retired, like I said, but she's complaining to Epstein that her retirement pay doesn't kick in for several months, and she's struggling. Her father, she says, was really sick and in hospice, and she asked if Epstein would help her out with a construction loan that she needed. She asked to borrow $200,000 from child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. And I give the link and I give a snapshot of the article or of the email here so that you can see it when the written piece will come out tomorrow. So the letters of affection for Jeffrey Epstein continued throughout the years into 2019. There's a lot of them. And so I want you to think about this timeline. And you're thinking about this timeline, you can clearly see how CBP officer Carol Montgomery interacted with a known adjudicated sexual predator of children in her official CBP capacity, and then engaged in a personal relationship with him, seeking favors and money. That's corruption. In other emails, she stated repeatedly how Epstein helped her over the years when she needed it. So there's more that we don't know about, perhaps all that redacted stuff that we can't see. She asked for financial assistance on more than one occasion. Montgomery is even shown in the emails assisting Epstein and his staff with approving passports and other travel documents for his boat and plane. She documented in her own emails that she knew about his crimes and lamented that the media was attacking him for his predatory nature. She had the nerve to stand before the seal of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency with a known child sex predator. I just can't get over that. Yet not once did she ever have Epstein investigated for sex trafficking of minors. In fact, it appears that she helped her good friend get through his CBP inspections. So, where are these experts in sex trafficking as CBP is the experts in all this? Well, for an agency that claims to be experts in identifying sex trafficking, CBP failed these victims in a multitude of ways and continues to do so. First, the CBP officers involved did not properly inspect the boats and planes. This is especially mind-boggling when you consider Epstein was a known convicted predator. The officers stated that they knew who he was and what he had pleaded guilty to. Instead of conducting their inspections with that in mind, they chose to ignore and downplay the implications. They even joked about his island being a pedophile island and his plane being a school bus. They accepted invitations to play drums at his parties, have lunch with him, ride in his helicopter and his boat. They used their positions as CBP officers to ask Epstein for financial advice and cash loans while offering him faster and inadequate inspections as well as off-duty inspections of his plants, which is a favor. Secondly, if the FBI or anyone else has done a thorough inspection of the CBP records for Epstein, they are not in the Epstein files. While there are many CBP flight logs and inspection notes, it is easy to see that much of the CBP data is missing. Every single flight would have been recorded by the agency, along with every single person on those planes with their passports and their IDs. Yet there is nothing there, whether redacted or not, there's just nothing there, aside from the flight logs of Maxwell and Epstein themselves. And I do not hear anyone in Congress demanding this evidence. Lastly, CBP and Congress continue to fail these victims because they have not demanded any investigations into how the agency could have allowed this to happen. The administrations of Biden and Trump have not demanded any inquiries into why the supposed experts of CBP, experts in sex trafficking, particularly child sex trafficking, ignored plane loads of little girls to his private island, a private island of a child sex predator that the CBP officers admitted they laughingly referred to as Pedophile Island. The first thing the current commissioner of CBP, Rodney Scott, should have demanded was an investigation into why this happened in the first place. It is not possible for a child sex trafficking network this large that existed for over a decade to not be known by CBP officers when they are literally being inspected by those officers. It is not possible. That is exactly but this is exactly what the files demonstrate. They knew, and they admitted that they knew. The commissioner must know why and how this happened. He must demand to know who was involved and hold them accountable in order to set an example and create deterrence for other officers willing to cross the lines of corruption. Congress must demand this of the agency because without it, CBP is literally aiding and abetting in the cover up of child sex trafficking. And they are continuing the cover up because many of their own officers are implicated in it. Those involved must be held criminally and civilly responsible if Americans are to ever believe CBP is a professional law enforcement agency. But I am not holding my breath on that. It's just a statement of fact of what needs to happen, but I doubt it's going to happen. And I think for me, the picture of Jeffrey Epstein next to CBP officer Carol Montgomery in front of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, that pretty much says it all. I mean, I kind of think from now on, they should always have that picture of because that's who they are. That's who you are. That's what you allowed to happen, you bastards. You allowed it to happen, and then you sit there and go, "Oh, well, no, I really didn't. I didn't do this. I didn't do that." Okay, well, maybe I did some. Maybe I did a little bit, and I also like to go to Central America. Mm. and 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 I like to engage in, personal relationship rendezvous. Okay. Yeah. So that's what, when you ask yourself, like, how could something like this happen? And I see everybody, we talk about the victims. We talk about that the files haven't been released. We talk about that they're not redacting the names and this and that of the victims, and that they're redacting the names of the people who abuse the victims, right? But the one thing that I don't hear anybody saying, where is where's the inquiry into CBP? And it's just this, and you see this over and over, whether it's the Epstein case or any other case. When agents are brought forward for their malfeasance or their misfeasance, they're intentionally not doing their jobs. Unless they can provide an actual, like, okay, they got $10,000 in their account kind of thing. The government, the FBI, the investigators, the prosecutors, the Department of Justice all are like, well, it didn't really get all the way there, so we're not really, but it doesn't have to be. Just the appearance of this is enough to get somebody fired. And we're paying for CBP officer Carol Montgomery's retirement right now. We're also paying for Roush's retirement, Timothy Roush's retirement right now. And they shouldn't have that retirement. They should not. They should be brought forward and a full investigation into their acts. I mean, she has a picture of herself in the CBP office with this predator. And they're like, "Oh, yeah." It's just absolutely disgusting, but you don't hear anybody in Congress on the left or the right saying, "We need to know how this happened and why this continues to happen." Um, the idea that because their intended corruption or crimes maybe didn't reach full fruition, like maybe Jeffrey didn't give Carol the $200,000. He did say it was problematic, so I don't think it happened. But she just flat out came out and asked him for the money. I mean, and even before she retired back in 2010, 2011, she was literally saying, "Can you tell me what to do with $10,000? I'd like to invest it." I mean, she's literally like saying, I'm willing to play. I'm willing to play. Do you want to play? Yeah, let's play. That's corruption right there. That's corruption. And then just them sitting there going that they don't believe the victims, even after he pleads guilty to this. And granted, it was um, a mediocre charge at best, but still, he pled guilty to it and this and that. And that is something that they should all be like, oh, this guy's a sex predator of children, and we should be looking into that. And not a single one did. They just all joke with each other and they make up names and all this other stuff. And And what that's indicative of is the culture of these agencies, CBP, Border Patrol, and ICE. I can't speak to FBI and DEA and all that, but the rest of them, that's the culture of it. And that's what I talk about when I talk about the rape culture. It's not just that they're raping and hazing female agents in the academies. They are. And even afterwards, that happens to women in the Border Patrol. It happens to the men who are perhaps perceived to be homosexuals. It happens to them. So if they're willing to do it to their own people, what do you think that they're doing to the migrants in their custody? I mean, seriously, come on. So, and then you see all the allegations of people who've been arrested protesting ICE saying that they're being sexually assaulted, and there was that one video we saw of the guy pushing the woman up against the car. He's got her in cuffs and he's pushing his penis up against her butt and all this other stuff. And it's just constant with these guys. It's constant with these guys. And I do want to say that John Carlos Frey, the raid, he came out with a piece this week on ICE, specifically in ICE custody, so in ICE detention facilities. And he goes all the way back to the early 2000s. We're talking thousands upon thousands of sexual assault of migrants in their custody. And this is what the government admitted to. And then when they had independent researchers and investigators go back and evaluate what the government said, then they found 1,000 more on top of it. And I would guarantee you it's even more than that. And it's very rare that these agents are ever held accountable. Just within the Border Patrol, within the last 3 years, we have lost Chief Michael Banks to allegations of sexual tourism in, I believe, in Asian countries, maybe in Thailand, I'm not sure. And then also he went to apparently Colombia and Mexico. The deputy chief of the Border Patrol, Joel Martinez, he had to resign, and they warn him. So they're being investigated, but then they warn him, you're being investigated. We might have to file charges against you. So the CBP's Office of Professional Responsibility, which is their internal affairs, they're all made up of ex-Border Patrol and CBP agents. And so when this happens, then they go, "Oh, sir, you might want to retire. You got your 20, 25 years in, get your pension and get your retirement and get the hell out of here." Because when they retire, then they just go, "Oh, there's nothing to see here. We're not going to investigate. They're gone now." Chief Tony Barker Jr., same thing as the deputy chief. He was accused of requiring female agents, junior female agents, to provide him with sexual acts. He denies it, of course. They all deny it. I don't think Michael Banks denied his sexual tourism. He's saying I don't think he said anything, but a lot of people are saying in the countries that he was going to, it is legal. It does not matter. It does not matter. It is illegal for a federal agent to engage in activities that would be considered illegal in the United States. And they teach you that in the academy, and they know that. But the fact of the matter is, and I've written about it, like from the get-go, once the agents get to their stations and stuff, the older agents and managers will, once they get past their probationary periods, they will then, like for the Border Patrol, it's very common for them on graduation night of their probation period to take them down to Mexico and buy all the prostitutes, drugs, and alcohol they want. And that's done on purpose because then it creates this double system, this gotcha file. So you have two files in these agencies. You have the one that is your employment file that says when you got in, entry on duty, EOD date, all your training, what academy you went to, all this other, what your scores are, blah, 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 yada, yada. And if you have any disciplinary action, it'll be in there for whatever and this and that. And then you got your dirty file. My dirty file probably said I was a lesbian and a complainer about being sexually hazed into the United States Border Patrol. But for the men, their dirty file is, oh yes, he participated in the graduation parties in Mexico. He goes every weekend he goes through the gates and doesn't go through the port of entry because we have special keys. And so we can let each other go through the gates. So then it's not recorded that we're going back and forth into Mexico. And so you can engage in that kind of activity and think you're pretty much in the clear. And they brag about it, openly brag about it, standing on a checkpoint in the middle of the night. Oh yeah, I was in Mexico this weekend. No, 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 no. And it's in that book right there. I talk about it. And that stuff goes back generations upon generations in these agencies. It's part of the culture. And not to say that all of the guys do it, not all the guys do it. Some of the guys in the Border Patrol are very religious and they're not into that kind of shit, but they keep their mouth shut. And so that's how this happens. I don't expect CBP Commissioner Rodney Scott to do anything about this when he was the chief here in San Diego sector of the Border Patrol here in this specific sector. His supervisor for the cover-up teams, my friend Armando Gonzalez, was found to be using the cameras that they have in the illegal cover-up teams to he placed the cameras in the bathroom floor in the drains so he could film female agents going to the bathroom, and then he uploaded them onto the internet. And he caught women that he was working with, female agents that he was working with, and he also caught a female FBI agent and some women who were janitors as well. And what Rodney Scott did was he stalled the investigation for quite a while, for months, and that allowed Armando to get rid of a lot of evidence. And that also allowed Armando to get to his retirement month that allowed him to then retire. And then he pled guilty to one count of voyeurism, I believe, and one count of maybe uploading it to the internet, something like that. Very minor, right? So he pleads guilty to that. He gets 21 months in prison. Lucky if he even does a year. And the best part about that for Rodney Scott is then there's no disclosure. There's no trial. So we don't really know what happened. And we don't know all who is involved. And so they do this because they view anything negative like that shines a negative light on the agency as more problematic. And so in exchange for being able to keep his retirement and go his full 20 years and stuff, he makes this plea, and then everything gets quieted down. Now, the victims in that case, they ended up filing suit, and they ended up winning millions of dollars, awarded millions of dollars, not by the Border Patrol, and they had to sue Armando personally. But they can't get any access to his retirement, so they haven't been paid a single dime. If you want to hear about that case, I recommend it's on Reveal News, REVEAL, Reveal News, and it's called The Fearless 5%, and it tracks the Border Patrol's rape culture of female agents since our very first Latina in the Border Patrol, Ernestina Lopez, when they raped her in the academy like they did me. And she complained and demanded justice, and so they fired her. And I complained, and then I shut my mouth and just took it. And so I was able to keep my job because I kept my mouth shut about it and backed away from the complaint. So this has been going on. I mean, Ernestina came in 1975 with the first class of female agents. And so that's what's going on. Don't question my hearing or intellect. What's going on with y'all? Why are y'all fighting? Don't fight. Please don't fight. Can't fight. Oh no. Okay. Does anybody have questions? If you have a question, throw it up there and I'll see. Reveal News. Yes. Yes, Jamie or Jaime. It is Reveal News. Male dominated. Yeah. It's a rape culture. But the level of how robust it is just insane. But that tells you why, like, CBP recently, this year, I believe it was, When they went down here in San Diego, CBP showed up at our ports down here where the cruise ships come in from Mexico, and they raided, like, 5 different cruise ships, and they said that they found, like, 27 or something, child predators on those ships. And, um, and yet at the same time, they're like, "This is a very serious accusation." They were saying that they were on the Disney ship and all this other stuff, which, those are families with kids and stuff. And and CBP's like, yeah, they're all child pornographers, and, but don't worry about them. We took their documents, and we've already deported them." And it's like, "Wait a minute. You didn't charge them with child pornography crimes? You just accused them of it?" And so, like, even when they do claim that they busted a child pornographer, they're not actually going through the criminal system. So I think there's they also use the rape culture to make false allegations against people. I'm not saying all of them were false, but they've provided absolutely no evidence, and there are no court cases for these people. They completely gave them no due process. They just took their documents and shipped them back to whatever countries they were from, and they had no say so in any of this. And so that begs the question, like, I mean, I just don't understand that as a law enforcement officer. When I was an agent, it's like those are the people I wanted. I wanted to get those people. I wanted them to serve their time, and I wanted to protect the kids, but they're not. They sit here and claim they're going to protect kids, but they're not. And this is why you see in the ICE facilities and stuff all the rape and the sexual abuse, and they just ignore you. They just don't care, and it's because they literally get away with it constantly. And Congress knows about this. This is not a big secret to Congress. These reports from whether it's the ACLU or different groups over the years, different, non-governmental, organizations, NGOs they call them, over and over they have given these reports. And they just ignore it. They just always ignore it, just like they ignore everything I've written about and proven the culture, and the Real News podcast proves the culture. It's just proven over and over again, and they just do not give a shit. They don't care. They only care about sexual assault when it benefits them politically. That's the only time they care about it. If it benefits them politically, then yeah, they'll go after it. But otherwise, it's just, they just don't care. It just doesn't matter. They think their agents are entitled to it. I think in Texas, I think that's, I know we've seen the issue at Dilley where they have one little group, which is all these young girls who are pregnant, and it's the pregnant little ward center in there. And CBP and ICE, it would be ICE. ICE hasn't really said, like, did they come into the system pregnant, or did they become pregnant once they're in the detention system? I would imagine it's a little bit of both, but we have no idea how much, and we have no idea what is happening to these young girls other than that obviously in Texas they're not going to be able to get abortions if that's what they choose. And certainly if they're minors, I don't think that they would allow them to make that choice either, even if Texas did allow abortions. And so we literally have no idea what is going on in these detention centers. And like I said, sexual assault and violence is going to be a part of this. And the people that they are hiring to do these jobs and work in these detention centers, they are the worst of the worst. It's not the immigrants. I'm sorry. It's not to say that all immigrants, I mean, obviously there are some, but they're hiring the worst of the worst to be in these facilities. And these facilities are brutal. They're brutal. And the only type of person that would want to work there, think about that. Think about that. And none of them, you're right, Arlene, none of them should be in a concentration camp. So, but anyhow, that's the way it goes. So I hope this cleared things up for you. I hope that it gave you kind of an overall picture of how CBP could allow that to happen, and the fact that they literally aided and abetted in this. They allowed it to go along through their misfeasance and their malfeasance. Um, And the fact that Rodney Scott and CBP, I mean, I hate I hate to tell you to write to your congressman about this because they don't even give a shit about it. They just really don't even care. They don't care. And they especially don't care because they know both sides of the aisle are in the Epstein files, right? Yeah. So, I personally am really tired of all the sexual violence, and I had it. I've really freaking had it. It is a crime, and we need to start prosecuting people. You know, the biggest thing they say in immigration is, "Well, you gotta have deterrence, gotta have consequences for people committing crimes," but yet there are never any consequences for people committing sexual assault. Whether it's a child or an adult, whether it's a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. God forbid you're transgender. Right now in ICE facilities, they've determined that transgender people don't have the right to file complaints against sexual assault. It's just mind-boggling, and, um, and it's just gonna get worse, and they can have all the policies they want and say, "We don't tolerate this." "Oh, we have a no tolerance policy on sexual abuse." Prove it. Prove it. You can't prove it. And what you prove is that you do tolerate it, and in fact, you love it. You love it. You love it so much, your agents will take pictures in front of your seals that you say are so honorable and all this other stuff, smiling with your CBP officers. And nobody cares to ask about this. So, at any rate, I know we have a lot to work on. I don't know necessarily that this is the area to focus on, um, because we have so many other things going on, and it's going to get worse as we're seeing in with the election coming up. ICE is starting to get out of control again, and I do want to mention that the violence that they're bringing is completely on them, um, and you can see that after, especially when Chief Bovino, you know, when he went too far and they had that Alex Preddy shooting and the Renee Good shooting, and then finally you saw Tom Homan and all them backing up. And they're like, "Okay, okay, okay, we'll calm down." And it's like, well, wait a minute. You were saying the whole time that the violence was being brought by ICE protesters, but now you're saying you can tone it down. Well, that means that you're then creating it. You're instigating it. If you can control the level of violence, then why aren't you controlling it? So when you see this upkick that we're seeing right now with the killing of Lorenzo in Houston, and the killing of Yohan in Maine and the others, that's intentional. This is intentional. This agency and these agents are not going out haphazardly. They would like you to think it's a one-off, a bad agent, and this and that sometimes. It's not. This is how they're trained. And for people who say they're not properly trained, none of them are properly trained like they're supposed to be, like they tell you they are, like the manuals say they're supposed to be, like the law says they're supposed to be. But they are properly trained for this level of brutality, this ignoring the law, violating the law. That is what they're trained to do. And they train them and then provide cover up teams so that they can get away with it. That's the problem. So, no judicial oversight. Yeah, there's no judicial oversight. And for a long time, so I spent the last probably 5 years going and sitting and watching cases of Border Patrol agents, variety of cases, whether sex crimes or domestic violence and things like that. And what I find over and over, so I wrote an article about it a while back. It's on my Substack of how judges are letting agents get away with crimes. And what they do is the victims don't want to go to every single hearing. And these cases draw out for years, at a minimum 2 years, anywhere to 10 years. And at some point, the victims have to move on, right? And so what the judges down here do in these little courtrooms when you get Border Patrol agents on video pointing their gun at their spouses and this and that, threatening to kill them, they get these horrible charges of threatening and basically terrorism and violence and domestic violence. But what the judges do is they draw it out, and while they're doing all these little hearings, they assign the agents who are on administrative duty They assign them then to go to, like, Alcoholics Anonymous, they assign them to drug programs, they assign them to all these little stupid programs that get paid to do this, and if they do that and they keep their asses clean while this is going on, then quietly the prosecutors and the judges, because the victims are like, "I'm not going to this anymore, I'm tired of these hearings," and blah, blah, blah. They are quietly, while the victims are away, going, "Okay, we're gonna drop it down to vandalism." I mean, just a misdemeanor vandalism charge, where a literal gun to your face in a video gets dropped down to a vandalism charge. Mike Matsky, the former president, Border Patrol president of El Centro's Union. "I'm talking about you, boy." And then he keeps his badge and he keeps his gun, and they let him get back in there, and they had PTSD, or, "Oh, they had this," or "They're prior." I don't give a fuck. I don't care. You broke the law. The law is supposed to be the law. But for these agents, as you see, the law doesn't exist. As the vice president and everybody else seems to believe they're immune from anything, and they can do whatever they want. And I will tell you right now, when they get into your cities, those are called details or tours in the agencies. And they often say, "What happens on detail stays on detail." It is drinking every freaking night. It is fucking your brains out. It is just the Wild West. It's like spring break. It's like spring break for these agents, and they get paid a shit ton of money to go and do it and tear up your cities. So when they come to your town, lock your kids up, lock your women up, because it's nasty. As you saw in Chicago and stuff, you saw ICE agents and stuff tooling around, getting arrested by the local cops who were out looking for people who were soliciting minors and stuff for sex. And lo and behold, up rolls up an ICE agent. "Hey, boys, I'm an ICE agent." It's not the first time they did this. They do it brazenly. So, at any rate. All right, everybody. I hope y'all stop fighting. I love you all. Thank you. It is a lot like the military. It is. All right. Thank you all. Night.